Now we're going to have a bit of sport in a minute. Firstly, a couple of your texts. €6 to dump a black sack at the dump. This is too much, says a texter. Regarding the COVID-19 payment, if you only work part-time and don't usually earn €350, you'll have to pay back the money that you would have earned over it. So if you only normally earn €150 a week, you'll have to pay back €150 when you return to work. The taxman could come after you, says this texter. Betty Lawler rang in to 051 846 123 to say she'd love to thank her son-in-law Danny McCreevy and her brother Tom for all their help in the last few weeks. They've been fantastic and really looked after them. Betty Lawler, thanks to Danny and her brother Tom. Martin Flavin, good morning.
Good morning, Damien. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We normally sometimes would have a little bit of sport after 11 o'clock, and we're going to do that now. A lot of teams and a lot of players in the Waterford and District Junior League. We're not going to talk about schoolboys or schoolgirls at present. We're going to talk specifically about the Waterford and District Junior League. You're secretary of the league. Tell me how many clubs are in the Waterford, South Kilkenny. It includes Carrick as well. How many clubs, how many players approximately?
We have 32 clubs, Damien, with 94 teams. So roughly going up to 2,500 players.
2,500 players, and it's one of the it's one of the bigger leagues outside of Dublin and Cork, isn't it?
Well, actually, no. It's the second biggest league in Munster, Damien, after Limerick. Because there's so many leagues in Cork, there's none of them as big as Limerick or Waterford.
Yes.
I think there's six or seven leagues in Cork. You know, like you have the Cork AUL, the Cork Business League, you know, Cork Youth. So they're split up, so that none of them would be as big.
And a great history and tradition, obviously. In terms of the COVID crisis, all matches and everything and all training and all the grounds were closed as with government requirements and remain closed at present. Is that right?
That's right, Damien. We look, same as everybody else, we're being guided by the government and the health look into it and make sure that everyone keeps safe.
Yes. So what the FAI have been looking to do is try to find out what do clubs feel about this matter, and you sent out a survey to clubs, and the result of this survey is just in about, I suppose, what clubs would feel about starting up the continuing the current season, or maybe scrapping it, or what's going to happen. What have you found, Martin? What have clubs come back to you and told you?
Well, basically, first of all, Damien, it's been roughly 2-1 in favour of scrapping this season and then hopefully getting back in the new season as quickly as possible. Again, depending on what comes out of the next meeting between the FEI and the Health Committee and Sport Ireland. Now, I believe that meeting is taking place tomorrow. There'll be the FEI, the GEA and Rugby Ireland will be meeting, and they're trying to get a joined up, for want of a better word, joined up effort to get people back into sport when it's safe to do so.
Yes, and the result then, so clubs in favour of scrapping the season, 21, and clubs in favour of continuing the season, 11. So, as you say, effectively a 2-1. And in general, some of the comments that would have come back from clubs are clubs kind of a bit annoyed that the FAI hasn't shown a bit more leadership in this?
Yes, Damien, that's the overriding team that came out of clubs that did put comments. Some clubs just said, scrap and continue where possible. Other clubs went into great detail. Like one club just said to me like that they have a minimum of 10 frontline staff in the club. And he said, this body said to me, look, Martin, he said, these guys, these people, they're more interested in health than they are playing football at the moment. I had a phone call from a club chairman yesterday who told me that his wife and the treasurer's wife are both battling cancer at the minute. They said, this is sport. We don't want to do anything that's going to put our family in jeopardy. So sport has to take a background at the moment. And these are people who eat, sleep, and eat everything, drink football. Football is just in their veins, but they're being proactive in keeping their family safe. You know, this is the team that's been coming through. Yes, big time. I think nearly everybody feels that the FAI should have taken the lead earlier and should have made a decision earlier. But look, they've been going by what the government and the health committee have been saying. Now, personally, I believe they should have taken the lead, and they shouldn't have put it on the clubs to make this decision. Now, having said that, Damien, I think there's maybe a small reason why they did it this way, and that is because we know of one league who put up on their website last week that they were expecting all their teams to be ready to start back on the 20th of July. So rather than having people doing their own thing and maybe putting people in jeopardy, I think they decided to put it to the clubs across the country and see what they thought. You know, now I was speaking yesterday evening, Damien, to a member of the steering committee of the FAI. I wanted to find out what was happening, and I told him the way our vote went here in Waterford, and he said that's roughly what's happening across the country.
Okay,
roughly 2-1 to scrap this season and hopefully start whenever. Now, a lot of people, Damien, are thinking that it would be at least September before it'd be safe to get back to football. You know.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. By the way, Bill in Lismore says here, remembers Martin playing in goals for Waterford United back in the day, a true gentleman. Would that be right, Martin?
Well, I didn't play Waterford. There was a David Slavin played for Waterford.
Ah, well, that's Bill wrong then, yeah.
No. I mean, you talk to anyone in football, I was never that good. David never good enough to be playing while I was playing.
Martin, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
Not at all, Damien. Thanks very much.
That and all. Good to talk to you. Martin Flavin there, Secretary of the Waterford Junior League. I'm going to go straight to Regina, is on the line now. Good morning, Regina.
Good morning.
Regina Bushell, Chairperson of Shas Suez. We spoke to you yesterday, the representative body for early learning childcare providers, on the scrapping of the childcare plan for health workers. We were intimating yesterday morning, Regina, that something would have to be done, and the government, they did it last night, not obviously listening to us, but I think they were forced into the situation because of all the issues that you raised and that you'd been talking about. And effectively, it's a real mess, isn't it?
It is, and can I just say at the onset that the childcare providers, nearly learning and care providers across this country, wanted to support the frontline, but with everything that came up, it just wasn't possible. You know, we would have been happy to open maybe on a reduced level, voluntary. Obviously, some providers would be able to, and some wouldn't. But we were willing to support in a way that would work, I suppose, for our sector. But there were just too many complications around it. I think we went into those yesterday. There was the insurance and there was the employment. And most of all, it was the children as well. The children that you know, we would be, our employees would be expected to mind, maybe that they've never seen before, with no settling in stages. And you have to get to know children and build relationships. So in a number of different ways, it wasn't going to work. So what we really need to do at this stage is, like, the next phase of the government roadmap is really fast approaching, and we need to move to focus our energies to safely reopen centre-based care, because all of our parents, including essential workers and our parents that were working and are still working, mind you, there are a lot of parents still working that were not on the front line, that are without their childcare. And they want to see centres reopening as well. So we need to just progress that, obviously, within a safe and sustainable way. It's a safe way for everybody attending and for our staff, and a sustainable way for the providers who may be working at a reduced capacity when we reopen. And obviously, that is there we would be taking advice on how we do that going forward. But, you know, it is going to be challenging. And as you can see from what's happened over the last few weeks, we've learned a lot from that. And we're working at this time and at this stage and the next stage. Shas Suez will be working with the department and with providers and going out to providers to come back with obviously to advise us on what their challenges are going to be. And because as a provider myself, I know what the challenges are.
And just to remind people, like, out of a potential 5,000 childcare providers, only 6 had signed up for this deal that Catherine Zabone had put in place, and they obviously hadn't consulted you enough properly in terms of going through with this. can I just ask?
Consulted.
Yeah, I know. What's going to happen? What's going to happen next week specifically? Nurses and doctors that are due to go back to work next week and have their children minded. What's going to happen now?
I don't have the answer to that because we weren't involved in those talks. So whatever is happening and discussions that are taking place now will be taking place with NEFAD and with obviously the various departments that are involved in that to see how they can support. At this time I know that because we'd be dealing with frontline staff, a number of parents have organised some childcare already for them. So we just have to wait and see what comes out in the next few days after that. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question.
No, that's okay, yeah, and that's calling it as it is because we just don't know and the government doesn't know either. I presume they'll just say, well, listen, until we sort out some other system, you won't be able to go back to work.
Well, this is it, and that's why we really want to put forward with providing guidance and clarity and certainty to parents to allow them to plan to return to work, and that we are confident, that we can push for the next opening date. Who knows? Maybe they might bring that back a bit to support frontline, but we have to be ready for that, and we have to look at obviously from the point of view of opening our doors. The banks will be looking to be paid once we reopen. We're into a totally different thing. We have to take into account the sustainability of our sector business, no more than the hotels, restaurants and everybody else who is looking at the same thing, how they remain sustainable through the next phases of reopening.
Regina, thanks for joining us this morning. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care. Stay safe.
And
Bye.
yourself.
Bye-bye. Regina
Bushell there, chairperson of Shas Suez on childcare facilities. A lot of texts coming in, 083 3333 975. A few years ago I was changing a car. My husband was changing the car in the van for a brand new one. Went over to another county, over to Wexford and saved €1,000. Martin is a brilliant secretary, says this person. He would put most of the FAI bigwigs to shame the way he does his work. And Paddy texted in, Martin, top man in Waterford Junior football. Eddie in Tremoris texted, good morning. As usual, a total lack of leadership from the FAI, putting the onus back on the clubs. So if it fails, the FAI won't be responsible. Good morning. Can you confirm if you earned €200 part-time before COVID and now get 350, are you going to have to pay back the difference when you return to work? That's what the government has been saying. Good morning. I'm self-employed and receiving COVID payment of €350. I have a wife and 3 children. My wife is currently on maternity leave, which is due to finish next week. She's taking the unpaid leave as we have no one to mind the children. I'm trying my best to line up work, but I mightn't be back for a few weeks. Women and women on maternity are being forgotten about. That's exactly what Richard was talking about before the news. You're 100% right there on that, texter. Thank you very much for that. A caller phoned in to 051 846 123. On payroll, is there anybody on payroll that might be able to answer this query? Anybody listening to this might ring in or text in, please do. People returning back to work on Monday will finish their COVID payment this Friday, tomorrow. And then they will have to work a week in hand next week and won't get paid until the following week. Will that count as a break on the records, as they won't have a PRSI contribution or a credit? Does anybody know, is this correct? That's a very good point. Good question. Anybody have an answer to that? Please text us 083 3333 975. I had a text and an email in from Rachel in the Mountfield estate in Dungarvan regarding broadband. As you know, we managed and helped to try to get residents in estate in Tremor in Mountfield sorted out. So Rachel's been on to us from Highfield in Dungarvan, and they don't have broadband access down there. So we're going to follow that up, Rachel. Thank you very much. And the residents of the Highfield estate in Dungarvan, we will follow that up. Any texts and comments, please send them in. We're going to talk next about resentful relationships. Now, keep your texts and comments coming in. COVID payment is paid in arrears, isn't it? Says this texter. Therefore, the week's payment should be paid on Tuesday of next week. If it's a week in hand, so no break, I would imagine, says Colette. Good morning. Just wondering, any of your listeners been to try to get an MRI in UHW? As my husband was in the emergency department on Tuesday and needed an MRI but wasn't able to get one. I don't know specifically about that. I'm going to talk to Bernadette Ryan in a second regarding relationships. Firstly, some breaking news. The report finds failure to report Scouting Ireland abuse. So a report into past cases of sexual abuse in Scouting Ireland has found there was a cover-up and a failure to report abuse. This has just been reported on the RT News and other websites. The report, written and compiled by child protection consultant Ian Elliott, says the abuse was not responded to in a way that protected the abused or sought to hold the offender to account. Mr. Elliott was commissioned by Scouting Ireland last year to examine the matter and the extent of the abuse. So that has just been published in the last 3 to 4 minutes. We'll have more information on the news about that later, and we will cover that story tomorrow. Bernadette, good morning.
Good morning, Damien. I hope you're well.
Very good, thank you very much. Very good. Have you ever had a resentful relationship with anybody, Bernadette?
Oh, about half an hour ago.
Only half an hour ago, huh? Only 5 minutes ago. You're having one now with me.
Yes, indeed, yes.
I hate you, Damien. I hate you, Bernadette. I hate you more.
Absolutely.
As my father says, you should never say hate to anybody. Intense dislike is agreeable, but hate is not.
Yes. Well, actually, Damien, the opposite of love is not hate, but indifference.
Oh, indifference, yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
That's a worse thing. At least if somebody hates you, they actually care about you.
They have a passion for you, yeah. We're going to talk about resentful relationships, and particularly with couples at home where there's people working and the burden of homeschooling and all that sort of stuff. And we'll look at maybe some advice on how to deal with it in a healthy way. Can you define a resentful relationship, or give us a few examples of it, please?
Well, I think, sort of one of the things that causes resentment in relationships is when one or other or both parties have a sense that it's very unfair. Things, and that's usually around, domestic chores and things like that, the everyday, that there's an unfairness there. Now, in many respects, sometimes women tend to take on, particularly in the early stages of a relationship, a lot of these things, again, through, affection and love, and they want a nice home and all of those kinds of things. But all of that comes at a cost. Somebody has to do the work, somebody has to clean the toilets, all those sorts of things, So then sort of what happens is, if, we're all human, if someone's going to do all that for me, I'm probably going to take a back seat. So it can come to the fore and cause a lot of resentment and that sense of everything is just so unfair, I'm doing everything and all of those kinds of things, So I think particularly now in the lockdown, a lot of the domestic stuff has fallen on women's shoulders, Again, it's kind of in their nature to be the sort of caregivers in the family. So now we have children at home that need to be homeschooled, and the whole pile of stuff needs to be done on that. Both parties may be working from home, and so it just is like a boiling pot for resentment, and resentment builds, particularly if we don't address the issues, if we don't kind of nip it in the bud, as it were, it builds and builds and builds, and then there can be an argument over not clearing the table, and next minute, like stuff from 4 weeks comes out, and the other person is left sort of stunned to say, what's going on here? So there's a bit of that. But interestingly, also, Damien, that they've done some recent research on this in the States, and generally speaking, women have always there's a kind of a gender gap when it comes to unhappiness in relationships, and women have always expressed more unhappiness than men. And that gap has widened in the pandemic, particularly in states that are in lockdown. It's widened by about 66%. And the researchers are kind of baffled because there's all those factors of increased household chores, homeschooling, lack of income, but it doesn't actually, in the research they're doing, it doesn't pinpoint why women's unhappiness has dropped a lot more than men's. Men's has dropped very insignificantly statistically. So they're kind of scratching their heads around that one. Now, one of the reasons could be that women tend to look after relationships more. They tend to question, why is this happening? Why are we not connecting more? Whereas men, in the subject we were talking about the last time, sometimes just tend to get on with things, and they're not as good as women at identifying their feelings. Feelings can kind of confuse men. They're sort of like, sure, I'm grand, where women are much more able to identify and express their feelings. So I think there can be a lot of that building up, and women can become very resentful when men are not actually present in the relationship, when they're not attending to the relationship issues.
Do you watch The Simpsons at all?
Well, I used to. I don't watch them so much anymore.
I was getting back into them over the last few weeks in terms of watching some episodes, and Marge and Homer, and the idea that Marge being resentful to Homer. Are there a lot of Homers out there, do you think?
Do you know, there are, and I think, you know what, I used to enjoy The Simpsons, and it has its funny parts and all the rest of it, but I'm wondering, actually, has it really done a damage to the male image in America, do you know, of that lazy, funny but ridiculously lazy man at home drinking beers. I think that's kind of a bit unfair on men,
Does it reinforce a stereotype? Is that what you're saying?
I think it probably does. And let's face it, it's been in the psyche for over 20 years, being held up there. So I think it's...
Or does it reflect... because it comes back to... Because one episode I watched the other day was about Marge being resentful and this idea of the relationship and how they deal with that. And the outcome was that, well, if the man just shows love and sort of says, oh, this is the way I am, you'll have to accept me for how I am. That seems to be a narrative in a lot of relationships as well, doesn't it?
There can be a bit of truth in that, many women want men to be different, if only he would, if only blah, blah. And there does come a time, now it's not about accepting unfairness on oneself, but actually I often when I, delve into this with couples and say, well, what was he like when you met him? Well, he was the same, So there's that old thing about getting married, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but getting married in a church, going up, I'll alter him. A lot of women...
I actually hadn't heard that before. I'll alter him. I like that.
Yeah, a lot of women, without even realising it, I think unconsciously think, he'll change. I'll get him to change that. And fundamentally, he won't change. And why should he, in many respects? Do you know what I mean? He is who he is. And so I just think, the pandemic as well is kind of probably highlighting the differences in men and women too. Men tend to be very rational, get on with things, and also the researchers feel that men probably worry more about job-related aspects, But on the plus side, I will say this about the pandemic. I've read lots of anecdotal things about men saying they really have realised the importance of connecting with their family and their children and their partners. So there's an opportunity there for that. But just getting back to the resentment, really at the end of the day, resentment only affects the person who's resentful. It doesn't help at all. So it really...
So what do you do? Like, you need to talk. So somebody just texted in, how do I get my partner to talk through things when they're being resentful or when I can't get through? They brush things under the carpet. How do I deal with this in a healthy way?
Yeah, so they brush things under the carpet. So to me, that would be saying, okay, that there's a huge discomfort there for that person about talking about this. So it's about really finding the way, or allowing them to find the way where it will be more comfortable for them to talk about, So certainly in the heat of an argument or after an argument, it doesn't work for most men. Most men don't like arguments. They sort of back off from them. They want to get away from them. And a lot of times when I work with couples around that, I say, okay, so you need to literally take a time out, the same way as you might do with your child if they were having, a bad time or a tantrum or whatever. And when things calm down, to try and come back to it. But it can be really difficult because, again, when couples come to me, most men would rather stick pins in their eyes and sit there and talk about their feelings.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about heterosexual couples here because we have to, we'll deal with the homosexual couples another day in terms of that.
Absolutely. The dynamics that are there, different, But, and it's again, I think, because it can throw men into confusion. They literally cannot identify their feelings. They don't understand. This is in loving relationships now, sort of thing. They don't understand why their partner might be so upset. They really don't get the minutiae of relationship, which many women are very tuned into, So, again, maybe sit down with her partner and for her to say, kind of, I'm really unhappy here. I would like it if we could talk a bit more. And then the key to talking, actually, Damien, is listening, So for her, I'd be saying, if she's really tried everything and she's frustrated and they both love each other, to maybe, sit and listen to understand, not listened to correct. And a lot of women say to me then, oh, why does it all have to fall on my shoulders, you know? But it's like, well, what do you want here? Do you want to be happy? Do you want the relationship? So it does mean changing the dynamic, you know, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is futile.
As a person said to me a few years ago, two good things to help with resentful relationships is never compare families and never argue or never have discussions when you're drunk. That's very important.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Well, you know, couples that don't argue, it's not about not arguing, it's about how we argue. There's conflict in all relationships.
Yes.
And it's about making a space for that. You know, there will be differences of opinion. But I honestly think, you know, the resentfulness, if people can really understand, I'm the only person that's being damaged and hurt by this resentment.
Yeah.
So first of all, it starts with oneself. So what am I resentful about? What is it that, you know, it could be just as simple sometimes as, not as simple, but for example, you know, I can't stand it when, you know, things are untidy. Well, maybe the partner's going, well, it really doesn't bother me, you know. And now again, it's not about you have to put up with everything, but it's about prioritising. You know, it's like pick your battles, as they say. Say, okay, well, if I really can't live with that, I'm going to take that on. But how can we negotiate a fairer deal between us all and between the two of us, you know.
Perfect. Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate
Thanks, Damien.
it. You're
Take
so
care.
good. Thanks so much, Bernadette. Bernadette Ryan there, our relationship counsellor. What do you think what Bernadette has to say? Is she right? Let us know, please. 083 333 975. John has phoned in to say they should scrap the league, the Waterford Junior League, for the rest of the year, but just bring up Portlaw and Bowes. I don't know if John is a Portlaw man or a Bowes man, but that's John's idea. A caller also rang earlier about the National Lottery restrictions on advance draws. This is the correct information from the National Lottery. There are currently no restrictions on advance play. Euro Millions was suspended for a brief period, but is now restored to 8 draws. So if you're involved in that. Good morning. Is it legal to light a fire in your garden and burn rubbish in it? Can you find out, please, what the law is? Because I was out for my walk this morning. I saw a fire in a garden, black smoke coming out of it, and somebody there burning rubbish. What do you think? Let us know. 083 333 975. Damien, I know someone who was sent to Dungarvan for an X-ray or an MRI, not doing it in certain other places. A person asking, anywhere that you can get a phone unlocked, please. I need to change to a different network. And a lot of people texting in about the COVID payments. I'm a pensioner. I work 48 years, receive €250 a week, and some people are working a few hours a week are receiving €350 a week. So much for the pensioners. That's from Frank in the city. Eddie has also texted in, and I'll come back about that. Next, we're going to talk to a young man who is really looking at positivity and developing an app. Stay with us. I'm going to have Jordan Casey on in a minute talking about apps and phones and such matters like that. That could be him ringing there now. Firstly, regarding the text that people are asking about unlocking your phone, you can unlock your phone online with whatever provider you're with. You'll need your IMEI number, which you get by typing #06 into your phone. And another caller said something similar to that. Whatever network the person is with will unlock the phone by texting out a code. Regarding MRI, I know that UPMC are doing MRIs and have been very helpful. Obviously a bit of a backlog, but they're back up and running. Complaints about the €350 payment, said Eddie in the city. All workers full or part-time. It reminds me of a biblical story. In that story, the late arrivals were paid the same as those who started earlier. Personally, I'd be delighted to see everyone getting the same, whether they earned it or not. Another texter saying, just heard, if you're due back to work on Monday, your payments might stop tomorrow. I'm already out of money. The bills didn't stop, and now I have to go 2 weeks possibly without getting any money. What about working a week in hand? Now, one of the businesses in some of the areas that will be hopefully coming back to work in the next few weeks, maybe in the next few months, will be pubs and clubs. Jordan Casey, good morning.
How are you, Damien? Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to have you on. Entrepreneur and student. People will have known you from the pieces you've done on the telly and all different things now. How old are you now, as they say? You're growing up fast?
I'm 20 now. So
are you 20 now? My goodness.
The teen moniker, so I'm not really a kid anymore. So
yeah.
The baby face is starting to go a little bit, but yeah.
I did a piece with you for television when you started off, and I think we were in your first year in De La Salle, was it? You're probably only 12 or 13 at that stage.
Yeah, first year that was 2012, I think it was.
Oh my goodness,
Very interesting day.
So you've worked a lot of apps and you've developed apps for lots of different systems. Prior to this, you had developed an app for pubs and clubs, and obviously everything has been put on pause. You had an idea then to try and see, okay, what are things going to look like maybe afterwards? So talk to me about this.
Yeah, so as I said there, the last year or so I've been working on an app with pubs, restaurants and general sort of hospitality, the general hospitality sector in Waterford. And obviously then with the shutdown and the pandemic, everything came to a halt, and obviously we suspended services of the app as well because we didn't really have sort of a use. So it was obviously a negative thing. It gave me a lot of time to reflect, come up with a couple of new ideas and see how we could help in facilitating reopening. So what we've created is basically a feature called Table Pay, which will allow customers to easily and safely order, pay for and receive their food or drink to their table directly from their phone. And so what we hope is to sort of facilitate social distancing, zero contact, but also provide a sort of attractive and easy to use feature that we hope will bring people back into town.
Okay, so how is it going to work?
Okay, so basically, you're a person or you're with a group and you're going to a pub or restaurant. You go in, you sit down. Your table will have a QR code on it with a number. All you have to do is scan your QR code on your mobile phone, and you're instantly met with an interactive menu on your phone. So you pick out what you want, whether it be your drinks or whatever bit food you want, pay for it by card on your phone, and then the order will go to the bar, to the kitchen, be registered, be billed, and delivered to your table. Okay,
so it does away with the idea of the waiter or waitress coming up to you and talking to you and saying how's it going and what would you like and does away with that, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. It sort of facilitates that zero contact. And what we found over the past couple of years, it's been a very successful model used by a lot of big chains. Wetherspoons in the UK and here use it very successfully. So we've seen that there's a demand for this kind of product anyway. And now we feel it's more relevant and could potentially be more beneficial now in a time where zero contact and social distancing is priority than it probably would have been a couple of months ago.
You might do away with a few jobs, though. That could be
I guess that is a sort of a potential thing too. But I guess the contingency of it, and the fact that it just promotes that zero contact is sort of what we're trying to push at the minute.
Okay, so how far are you gone? And I've seen the YouTube video in terms of developing this app called Table Pay. How far down the line are you ready to go with this?
So our product is ready now. So what we're trying to do now is get an active call for venues. We're pretty much providing this service for free for the duration of the pandemic to get as many venues on board and try to attract that. We're also trying to get feedback from our users as well to get their opinions and see what kind of features they'd like to add. And so it's ready to go now pretty much. So all we're doing is making an active call to any local venue that feels like they might be interested in this or be interested in having a look at it to come on board, because it's completely free. We're just trying to do our bit for sort of facilitating the zero contact that will be sort of the new normal.
Okay, well, what we'll do is if any businesses want to do that, they can call in here or contact you through Twitter, Jordan Casey. And what we'll do, Jordan, is we'll go out with you and do a piece with you when we get one of those businesses or a few of those businesses signed up and see how it actually works. Would that be a good idea?
That'd be fantastic. Thanks very much, Damien. I really appreciate all your support over the years. So.
No problem, not at all. Listen, it's good to talk to you, Jordan. Take care and mind yourself, okay?
Thanks very much, Damien. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Jordan Casey there, entrepreneur and student. Now, a lot of people texting in regarding COVID payments. Senator John Cummins has sent in quite a big text. Damien, I believe it's very important for you to clarify that the government have not said at any point that part-time people will have to pay back the difference between their former pay and the €350. This is incorrect! ! While the scheme is not perfect, it was introduced at breakneck speed, and the reason it was not means tested was because we wanted to get money back into people's pockets quickly. Yes, I've said that. When you compare us to our nearest neighbours, we are only receiving their first payments in the last week. We prioritised safeguarding incomes to the greatest extent possible and will continue to do so. We might have you on at some stage, John, to talk about that, because I thought there was issues regarding revenue, where revenue have said that they will be looking at recouping any of the discrepancies in payments. So if there's going to be if you're telling me that there's going to be no payback whatsoever, that's news to me. Another texter, Damien, about the COVID payment. You could apply online and by getting your own application in a few stores. On both applications, you had a question. Do you work part-time or full-time? People gave the right information, not misleading information, but the right information. Why didn't they deal with the COVID payment? Because to my knowledge, there's a lot at fault. A lot of these people might not have to go back to work, especially the part-timers that gave the right information. So there'll be more pressure on them. So this person is saying that the questions were wrong. Another texter to say, yes, Jordan is a super guy. However, there is an app for some of the same venues in the UK already. Well, there might be one for Ireland, especially for Ireland. Stay with us. We're going to talk about Ballyduff Upper next. Now, keep your texts and comments coming in. Agnes, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Damon. Great.
Good. Agnes O'Donoghue, administrator of the wonderful St. Michael's Hall in Ballyduff. It's years since I've been there. How is it?
Well, at the moment it's quiet.
It's lonely.
It's lonely. But before all this kicked off, I suppose before the COVID hit, we're the centre point of the village here in Ballyduff Upper, and we were really busy. Thank God.
Yeah,
we will be again soon.
It's a community group and community groups within Ballyduff. It's one of the best and some of the best in the county. I've covered a lot of different stories over the years between community groups, and I'm not just saying that. I really, really believe it. The amount of things that you've done. Tell me about all the different community classes and fundraisers and drama groups and everything.
Well, it started off, the overall is the Ballyduff Community Council, and under the Ballyduff Community Council we have a lot of subgroups. In those, we look after the senior people in our community from Tea and Chat. We also have a 45 card drive committee. We have a social and festival committee to look after any festival and fundraising events. Outside of all of the community council groups, we have a fantastic community spirit in Ballyduff. In that, there's lots of groups locally like Kyoto's, Ballyduff Drama. We have the GAA. Under that, you have loads of sporting groups. There's a lot going on in Ballyduff, or there was a lot going on, and there will be a lot going on again when this is finished. But from that, I mean, like every evening, the village was the hive of activity between the sport field and the village here, with all the different groups. And from that, like we've had the start of the year, we've had Ballyduff West Waterford Drama Festival, which unfortunately was cut short by 3 nights due to the COVID. Every year we've had the home of the Booley House here in St. Michael's Hall. And obviously, outside that, we have our community council, which does a lot of main fundraising events in the village.
I know a lot of people have been keeping in touch online, and there's been some sort of, I suppose, Zoom meetings and things like that. And some of the yoga teachers that have been using the hall, they would obviously be doing their services online. Is that true?
Yeah, that is. And with that as well, Kyoto's as well have been keeping all their classes going online and keeping all their, children busy, I suppose, with activities, fun activities as well. Everybody has been kept going, thank God.
Yeah. What's going to happen, do you think, Agnes? Like, it's very difficult to know, and we talk about the government and all that, issues that have it at higher levels and people reopening businesses. Like, a community hall is the heart of so many communities. So what plans or what steps will you be putting in place to possibly reopening it at some stage?
We're currently working, as I said, with the board of directors here in the hall, and we're using great advice from our local enterprise centre. So, I mean, between all the government bodies, obviously the key thing is to follow the HSE guidelines, and using the phase plan, I suppose, is for reopening. But at the end of the day, we have to put things in place, and it's down to the safety of our community is first and foremost. And from that, we've looked at each space and area within our facilities. And to date, we've put in, hand sanitising stations. We'll be removing chairs from, certain areas in the rooms. We've set up areas that will be, essentially for one-to-one classes or for even a one-to-one meeting, or there's some areas that meetings can contain. And again, it has to be, mindful of the 2 metre social distance. This will all be adhered to, and that's what we're working at the moment to make sure when we do reopen that all the boxes are ticked, and at the forefront is safety for our users and our community, to come back and join us basically when our doors are open.
Yeah, and I'd say people will buy into it because they'll know the work that's been put in, and they'll know how the council works, and I suppose what's gone before has proven that you're very good at organising things in a very strategic way, and it'll change though, won't it? It'll change things for a while.
It will,
anyway,
because
yeah.
I mean, a big part of Ballyduff and the hall here and our facilities will be fundraising events. But I know when this, when everything kind of smoothens off, I suppose, and when I can't say back to normal, but we will be looking at, changing events, I suppose, and fundraising ideas and ways. And I know when it does come back that, the spirit and the community will be at the forefront of supporting these events thoroughly, as they always have been.
Yeah. And in terms of groups that may be down money at the minute and fundraising is going to become more important, I suppose, that's another thing as well, isn't it?
That's something we're trying to look at the moment and plan ahead and see how it's all going to pan out for us, I suppose. But I suppose everybody is in the same boat, and we just have to take it and take the guidelines and work with them and try and come up with new ideas. And
I know you want to just say thanks to everybody in Ballyduff for all the support people have given. Yeah,
amazing. And I must say that, even outside of the Community Council, the people that have been put their names forward to volunteer to help us in our COVID response group that we're under the Waterford Community Call group, we've been inundated with messages of people that want to help, from collecting messages, medicines, delivery vans. Everybody has come out. It's unbelievable. But it's just the true spirit of Ballyduff. That is the way people work here. That is the way, they show their commitment to their neighbours, to their friends, people they mightn't have seen, but they want to help, basically.
Well, you've put that very well. Agnes, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for time.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Agnes O'Donoghue, Administrator of the wonderful St Michael's Hall in Ballyduff Upper, and here is what I would say, and people texting in are saying yes, fabulous community, and well done to the council there and all the different groups involved in Ballyduff. Good morning, I can't believe what I saw this morning, says this texter, just off Ballynacorty Pier. A small inflatable boat anchored off the pier, one man aboard, proceeded to go diving, on his own I may add. The Irish Water Safety and the RNLI and the Coast Guard are advising people not to participate in water sport activities. Please heed their message. Another message, why are some pubs serving takeaway, also selling drink to the people that are waiting for food on the green in pubs? I didn't think this was right. Is it one law for one pub and one law for another? I don't think so. Another texter texting in about COVID-19 restrictions. My nearest shop is 3 miles away, and that's where I've always shopped. Would love to travel to Youghal or Dungarvan, which are both 8 miles at home from home, but not breaking rules set down. Yet there's a chap from another county up in the Midlands who's travelled to his holiday home, and he's been here for a week, and I think this is unfair. What's the story, says this texter, regarding COVID-19 Garda checkpoints from the 18th of May, or are they finished? Will they continue? My understanding is they'll be back at certain stages, and they're not going to just go away, as they say. And that person has texted back about the phone unlocking. Type in #06 hashtag into your phone. You'll need to get what's called your IMEI number. Now, thank you everybody for all your texts and all your comments. If I didn't get to any of them this morning, my apologies. Benny Brannigan, happy birthday today, and Matt and Lauren. Keep your texts and comments coming in. We'll deal with more of those matters tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. Hard to believe another week is nearly over. Thank you, Julie, for producing. Thanks to our news team. And Andy is up next. Have a great day, folks. Take care and stay safe.